Very good morning to you all. Welcome to Sunrise Daily. I'm Chamberlain Oso.
Good morning and welcome. I'm Ayo Makinde.
All right, so today, yes, we're going to go right ahead and take a look at how the dailies reflect developments across the country. We've got Mr. Ikechukwu Mechi joining us here today. He's the editor of the Niche newspapers. Good morning. Thank you for coming on today.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Well, let's take a look at this first one. Nigerian Tribune, their perspective, the big one. Governors pacify police. Obaseki, hospital bills of injured officers to be paid. Makinde, families of slain policemen to benefit from 500 million naira compensation fund. So it appears as though, well, they thought, look, we can't expose or neglect the police. It was good for the goose, good for the gander. Those who have been perhaps victims of police activities, one way or the other, well, the police themselves have been victims of something. So the governor say, look, we need to look their way as well.
I think they are doing the right thing because at the end of the day, even the NSAS protest was not a protest against the police. Nobody is saying end police. The idea is not to say do away with the police, because you can't. In our modern society, you can't say do away with the police. Security is everything. Without the police, you can't even put a handle on police. And like you rightly said, there are people who have been abused, who have even been killed by the policemen. And then in this crisis also, there are policemen who have also been killed. And the idea is, what do you do? And most of those policemen killed may not actually be the so-called bad eggs who caused the problems. So what do you do with them? Do you leave their widows or widowers, their children high and dry? No. So the governors are doing the right thing. But beyond this, because the problem we have most times is this knee-jerk reaction to issues. The president talked about welfare of the policemen.
Yeah.
That must be addressed.
I think they're taking steps to see how they could quickly ramp up or at least address the salaries of police officers.
Well, they have been taking steps.
No, fresh steps. I mean, this fresh ones.
They will always not say that. When this crisis is over now, you will find out that nobody talks about it again. Let the president walk his talk this time around. The police, they need to be remunerated adequately, and even when they retire, their pension need to be upgraded. There's nothing to write home about the take-home package of policemen when they retire.
Well, that pension, it cuts across board in this country. I mean, look at the NSITF or look at the current pension scheme, the PFA. So it's something that's almost everywhere, every part. There are huge concerns and areas that needs to be improved. That's why people scramble or do whatever they can while they can, because they think that if they are out of those places, nobody caters for them. Look at our senior citizens, what happens on the streets, on the roads, while they queue up waiting to get their pensions.
I agree with you, but the issue of the police is quite peculiar. Because when the contributory pension scheme was introduced under President Olusegun Obasanjo in 2004, the government excused the military, but insisted that the police must be part of the contributory pension scheme. The police kicked. The government said no, that they are too large and too important to be ignored. And that was why they were licensed. MPF Pensions Limited was licensed as a one-client PFA in 2014. Now, there are issues that need to be addressed. NPF Pensions Limited has done so much in the last 6 years to bring to the attention of government what needs to be done in order to make the policemen live comfortably in retirement. Most of those things have not been done. For instance, they have said that policemen must be paid gratuity of 300% when they retire. There are several measures they have outlined there which the government has not looked into. There is this issue of what the government ought to contribute. According to the Pension Reform Act of 2014, what is being done now is that workers contribute 7.5%, government contributes 7.59%, which makes it 15%. But the Act of 2014 says that government should contribute 10% and the workers 8%, which makes it 18%. So that when that is put together, at least people will have something
yeah.
Up to now, 6 years down the road, nothing has been done.
We're going to have more of some of the dailies talking about the police, which you literally just weigh in on. But you spoke about some accounts. Well, yes, there's one of them here, just above this lead story. NSAS, my son arrested in 2019, not seen till date. Petitioner tells panel, family resuscitates 2013 murder case in Edo. So you might want to check that one out. But look at this at the bottom strip here. ASU Adamant says agitation is for survival of public universities. They always say this. They always say this. That is no, it's for the future of our institutions. And so it's not about our salaries, as people think. IPPIS or what's that? UTAS or not. That this is about welfare.
Well, the ASU university lecturers, they have been on strike now for almost 1 year, for at least 8 months or more.
Wow.
And that is a very huge, big problem. Of course, we didn't feel it much because we were in a pandemic. Now that the private schools have reopened, it becomes a big problem. ASU has its own faults. I won't say they are always right. But the issue is that government is not taking education as serious as it should. And the simple reason is that those top guys in power, from president to governors to ministers, you hardly get any of their children in Nigerian universities. And that's a problem. So they don't care whether the poor masses, their children stay out of school now for 1 year or for 2 years. It doesn't bother them. If their own children were to be in Nigerian universities, perhaps they will be a little bit more serious.
All right. And then the picture you see on the front page there, workers in Osun State during a thank you walk to Governor Gboyega Oyetola for approving the implementation of minimum wage in the state on Monday. So that's why you see that picture. So if you don't look properly, you think they're walking through the bushes. No, but the roads there, which I think in Osun State, remember that incident where I think they said they tried to take out the governor. They spoke about it. They declared certain people wanted for looting. They said they will go from house to house to search, but the rest they say is history. So that's Tribune this morning.
The Leadership newspaper leads with the same NSAS story, but from this time, it's from Northern Leaders. Northern Leaders ask FG to censor social media. Find that story on page 4 of the paper this morning. Say protests attempts to topple government outside ballot box. Whoa. Seek collective effort in tackling insurgency, Almajiri, poverty in the north. Presidency expresses worry over fake news. Lawyers divided over massive looting, imposition of curfew. Choose your pick. This is quite a lot, obviously.
I was sad yesterday when this news broke. Of course, the northern governors met with traditional rulers and top political shows from the north. They met in Kaduna, Kashim Ibrahim House in Kaduna, and they came up with this resolution. See, Ayo and Chamberlain, the biggest problem we have in this country, and that is why Nigeria is still where it is today, is this issue of ethnicity. Everything is ethnicized. There is no national consensus on what is good and what is bad.
What is ethnicized in the call for social media censorship?
No. The underlying issue they come up with was that the NSAS protest was an attempt at regime change.
And you think that's a sectional thing? You think that's something from just one ethnic nationality?
Why not? Why not? They are saying it because Buhari is the president. When Jonathan was in power, and all the demonstrations across the country, including those led by President Muhammadu Buhari, was it for regime change? Did they plan to topple the government? So why would a cause championed by youths be an attempt to topple the government? In any case, if they meant well, we have a pan-Nigerian governorship now forum. Why didn't they do it under the auspices of the Nigerian Governors now forum? So, who is toppling the government? The poor youths assembled in Lekki or what?
But they also cited the fact that maybe some divisive, other subversive people were the ones trying to take advantage of the good cause of the youths.
Who are the subversive people, Ayo? See, until we begin to look at governance from the prism of whether it is delivering on its promises and not who is the president and where does the president come from, this country will continue to plumb the depths of underdevelopment. If those who voted for President Muhammadu Buhari in 2015, we are not only the Northerners. The president had contested for the presidency 3 times before 2015 and failed. The only thing that made him president in 2015 was that the South, particularly the Southwest, teamed up with the North and delivered him. They didn't vote for him.
Who didn't vote for him?
I mean, I said, Buhari was not elected in 2015 because he was a Northerner. He was elected because people believed that he will be president of Nigeria. So, if we now come and all these things, they want to overthrow him because he's from the North. They want to overthrow him. Why? How will that change? Are there no poor people in the North? Don't policemen kill people in the North?
Okay.
The Shais that were killed in 2019, December 2019 in Kaduna, is it the South?
Okay, well, that conversation could be similar to what the Daily Trust is equally reflecting, because their northern governors, Nigeria indivisible, want social media censored. Fake news instigated the NSAS protests, as ascribed to the IGP. This is time for state police, El-Rufai. Okay? We must act fast to save our country. Experts. So, quite a lot packed in here. censorship of the social media, Nigeria's indivisibility. There's just so much going on.
Nigeria has indivisibility. Well, they've always not said that. And truth be told, I'm not too sure that those who want Nigeria to be divided are in the majority. They are not. Nigerians would love to live in a country where there is equity and justice. What people are clamoring for is equity and justice. And without equity and justice, there will be no peace. Make no mistake about that. See, I tell people, despite what IPOB is doing, there are perhaps more Igbo people living outside Igbo land than there are. If you go to Kaduna, if you go to Kano, if you come to Lagos, there are Igbos everywhere. And they're not Igbos who are idle. There are Igbos who have businesses running. Many of them don't even have any investments in Southeast. Those are not the kind of people who want Nigeria to be divided. No. But what they are asking for is that in their country, there must be equity, there must be justice. People must be treated equally, not some treated as first-class citizens and others treated as second-class citizens.
What about this? Pardon me. Well, what about this part of? You could add that to this: the fake news part instigating the protest, as ascribed to the IGP.
IGP has been economical with the truth. I am sorry to say, because what sparked the NSAS protest was the problem in Delta State. I think in Ughelli also. Is he saying that didn't not take place?
Part of what they're saying is that the person who actually did that tweet was arrested because they checked it out and said, no, that wasn't what happened. So he's answering questions now, and the police is saying that we went in there. We were the one who took the person. The person, what he tweeted was not what happened. And the police said, well, he is now being prosecuted because of the falsehood which he perpetrated, which people ran with, saying he misled people, and that's what IGP said. Yeah.
Let them come up with evidence of what they have, that there was no incident in Delta State. In any case, my people have a saying. They say it is not the day that the dog spilled palm oil that it is beaten. It is the day it spills the leftover.
Okay.
And it's because of the anger of what he did yesterday. The NSAS, the special anti-robbery squad guys were on the loose. And Nigerians have complained and complained and complained. Don't forget, in 2018, there was a promise by the government that they were going to disband this and NSAS. So if the IGP is coming out now to say it was not fake news, is he saying that if it is not true that those guys were doing things they were not supposed to do, why did he disband them?
Okay, but the Daily Independent leads with this one this time around. NSAS protests. Northern governors, monarchs call for control of social media, endorse indivisibility, indissolubility, oneness of Nigeria, push for resolutions of ASU strike, rules for monarchs, appreciating ongoing police reforms, back President Buhari. Protests show time is ripe for state police, ascribed to Governor El-Rufai. National Assembly to do justice to social media. That's ascribed to Minister. So that's also on the front page right there. But that social media part is definitely giving some people goosebumps.
Let's see how far they can go.
Okay.
But this is World Wide Web. This is World Wide Web. There is an extent to which you can control.
Yeah.
Even in China.
Interesting. Well, this one also, 4 billion naira bailout for airline operators, too little, say Senate and stakeholders. Senate begins public hearing on civil aviation amendment bills. Reps call for suspension of planned concession of airports. That story is on page 4 of the paper this morning.
All right, take a look at Vanguard newspaper next. Unpaid salaries. Civil servants besiege head of services office. Provisions made based on previous salary exhausted, says HOCSF. As head of service. Ministries staff better off than those in departments, agencies, ascribed to source. They pleaded for more time. Asks us to be patient, avoid newsmen protesting staff. So, what is all this about? You know that will catch your eye to avoid newsmen. Is it that they have something to hide? Oh, no. Say, look, going to newsmen might worsen it because we're trying to sort something out. So if you go to newsmen, you know what can happen about misconceptions. So how do we interpret this one now?
Well, they know the games they are playing, but I think that the truth of the matter is that the government does not have all the money to pay its bills. So if they are saying that the reason for the delay is that the new minimum wage was not factored into the 2020 budget.
Yeah.
Maybe not. But the truth of the matter is that government does not have all the money.
Okay, we still have some grounds to cover. Oyigbo killings. Withdraw soldiers in 72 hours or face ICC. INC tells Wike, I deigned order military to kill Igbo. That's also ascribed to him. But let me read Mr. and Mrs. for you before we take off. Well, Mrs. is telling Mr. here, dear, do you mind making a stop at the shopping mall to get me some items? And Mr. with his hand in his pocket just looks over his shoulder saying, that trick won't work. I just gave you some allowance for the month. If you want the items that bad, bring some money. No games here. That's my guy this morning.
Okay, Abuja Inquirer leads with what happened in Calabar. Calabar carnage, Ayade under fire. Nduma Egba fingers state government. Obong of Calabar wants governor to resign. This is lie from hell. That's ascribed to the governor. That's on the front page of the Abuja Inquirer this morning, if you want to take a look. But that's also another interesting talking point, wouldn't you say?
It is. It is. But, this NSASNA protest and this aftermath has exposed a whole lot of things in this country.
The question then is, how quickly will we be able to address them? I don't think you have an answer to that one.
I don't. And I wish the government will appreciate the urgency of the circumstance we are in.
And deal with it.
Okay.
And deal with it.
Okay.
Let's add this on before The Guardian. Options for Africa as U.S. votes. Trump hopes for election day upset against Biden. Nigeria's WTO bid hangs in the balance, says Otobo. So all of this in the mix. Big day now for the U.S.
Yeah, and today is the D-Day. Today is the D-Day. Despite the fact that, don't forget that over 19 million people have already voted.
I was going to say, well, the D-Day was already building up.
Exactly. Over 90%, over 90 million Americans have voted already. So, for whatever it is worth, everybody is tense because of the oversized role America plays in world economy, militarily, and even culturally. So everybody is interested. The only thing I wish to say is that whether it is Biden or whether it is Trump, Africa does not factor in much in America's calculations.
All right.
Obama was president for 8 years. I don't know how it impacted on Africa. If it is Trump, it is going to be worse.
Oh dear. Okay, there you go. So I guess we'll keep watching and see what happens. Well, that's it. We'll look at some of the dailies here this morning. Thank you for coming on. Ikechukwu Amici, editor of the Niche newspapers. We will be back in a moment. Don't go away. Welcome back. Yes, indeed, that is what we're focusing on this morning. Now we've got two gentlemen. Professor Walter Ihejirika is a professor of development communications, University of Port Harcourt. He joins us via Zoom. We also have Professor Ademola Abbas, who is an international law and global affairs analyst, also joining us via Zoom. Gentlemen, good morning, and thank you for joining us today on the program. Well, what a scenario. The meeting, the northern leaders having that meeting yesterday and coming up with resolutions, which, as reported in the dailies. Well, let's start off with your general impression of the outcome of that meeting in terms of some of the highlights. They've talked about the social media, they talked about policing, they talked about plan to topple government. Well, Professor Ihejirika, what do you think of this? We'll try and sort that out with Professor Ihejirika so we can just get his sound correctly. But Professor Abbas, you can hear me, I guess. Tell us what your impression was about those recommendations, the highlights of the meeting of northern leaders concerning the national security and NSAS protests.
Can you hear me?
Okay, I heard you. Go ahead.
Okay. Good morning, Chamberlain. Good morning, Ayo. Thank you so much for having me. Well, look, in the first place, there's nothing wrong for a particular region to have a meeting. I mean, Southwestern governors paid a visit to Governor Sanwo-Olu, and we've had this over and over. One would have wished that all the governors in Nigeria in the first place, came together to address a national issue, or national issues, as it were. But be that as it may, the outcomes, a mixed grill. On the one hand, you have an affirmation of the need to reform policing, which I think nobody would question that in the country. The old issue about the ASU strike and and so on and so forth. But look, when you take a step back, I think to start talking about people who want to pursue a some separatist, agenda and this and that, I don't think it's something that is the kind of thing that this kind of meeting should actually focus on. You cannot, on the one hand, be talking about the countries being indivisible, which we all signed to, we all agree to, under certain circumstances, that is. And on the other hand, be throwing shades here and there, and be saying that, the NSA protests were instigated by fake news and social media. That just, I'm sorry to say, is an unacceptable, palpable insult to the sensibility of all Nigerians, not just youths who went out on behalf of all of us, by the way, to demonstrate against police brutality and against a particular arm of the policing, a kind of goon called SARS, that I don't think even the police establishment or anybody in the country was actually proud of. So to then throw all those things into the bag and say, look, these things were, the protests were instigated by, fake news is just, I'm sorry to say, it just complete. It just blew me apart totally. So
Professor,
I'm not.
Yeah. Professor Ihejirika, if you can hear us now, what's your first impression of the resolutions of the Northern Governors Forum's meeting yesterday? Do we have Professor Ihejirika joining us now? Please go ahead, if you can hear me.
Maybe you might need to unmute. Okay, Prof, if you can hear us, you may need to just unmute so that we can hear you. I mean, sometimes these things can happen. But while we'll let you do that, if you haven't, I guess, the point Professor Abbas made about the fake news component, well, Prof, that his comments, the comments occurred to him saying that the scenario in Uheli in Delta State, because the text there was saying that the scenario there did not involve NSAS in Delta State in Uheli. And he says that was all of these protests were predicated or sparked off by that singular incident. Now, two things. Yes, there's been concerns about the activities, the conduct of the Special Anti-Robbery Squad way before that incident in Uheli. And so perhaps it was maybe those already pre-existing impressions that people had, perhaps it was fueled by this incident, which was not connected to fake news. So is it that if his comment was based on fact, he shouldn't have made it at this time, or he should have, how should he have approached it if he felt this is a fact of the matter? Professor Bass, that's for you.
Oh, sorry, I didn't know that it was there. So, look, Chamberlain, for me, what is important, to be honest with you, whether it's what happened in Delta or not, or this and that. Look, I'm a lawyer by training. When you have courses, you have immediate courses, you have, remote courses. A course is nonetheless, you can't say a course is less effective simply because it happened 1 billion years ago. Things accumulate. The truth is, things have accumulated in Nigeria. Nigerians have had problems with policing in this country. In fact, to be honest with you, with the whole raft of enforcement agencies in Nigeria. And part of the challenge we are not focusing on, Chamberlain, I will tell you, is that we are in a democratic dispensation. There is need for a democratic control of enforcement agencies in Nigeria. You have a system in which Nigeria has gone through a long period of military regime, and we emerge from that into some kind of democracy. I say some kind of deliberately, some kind of democracy. And then we think that the same apparatus of the state, that is the military, the armed forces, or whatever you have, will simply subject themselves to democratic controls of the democratic institutions. It does not happen overnight. So I don't really want to waste too much time on all this nitty-picking, saying it happened in Delta, is this and that. No, the truth is we should have been dealing with police reform 1 billion years ago. We should have been dealing with subjecting the entirety of our enforcement agencies to democratic controls. Look, just the other day, I think yesterday or 2 days ago, I read in the newspapers that the panel sitting in Lagos invited the military, and the military refused to come. They said they won't. I mean, if what I read in the news, I hope it's not fake news. It was in the print media. They wouldn't come, and they wouldn't even yield to the names of those who perpetuated crimes or the shooting at Lekki. Don't let's forget one thing. The first thing the Nigerian army did after the shooting that Black Tuesday was to come and say it was a fake news. There was something that came specifically from the military that was a fake news. Of course, then they then went back and said, well, in any case, we were invited by the Lagos State government. So between fake news and we were invited by the Lagos State government, who is lying and who's being truthful here? I'm not even coming to the issue of now, dealing with social media, but I'm talking about the fact that we cannot just, take all this thing as they are anymore. So there have been issues consistently that we needed to have approached long ago in the country, and they are coming to the fore. So don't let's waste our time by thinking it's what happened in Ughelli, it's what happened in Oyingbo, it's what happened in Ijesha-land. I was like, no. Every Nigerian knows today what problems this country confronts. And for me, the earlier we begin to think seriously now, at least talking about, policing and this and that, the earlier we begin to address the issue of democratic control of enforcement agents in the country, the better for us. I think that is a very serious issue that I think we need to start focusing on for now.
Well, one of the things that the northern governors also resolved at that meeting yesterday was to find a role for traditional rulers in the governance architecture of the country. That existed very many years ago in Nigeria, and I think along the line that tapered off. Could you backtrack, if you can, to when we operated that, what happened, and what do we need to do, if at all you see the need for us to bring that back? First of all, for you, does it have value? If it does, backtrack and let's see what we can do to make it better.
I imagine that question is for me, right?
Please, go ahead.
Fantastic. Now, there is no modicum of doubt in my mind that traditional rulers have a significant role to play in our governance architecture in Nigeria. Let me take you back to history. We all probably can still recall what happened in the days of the Western region and the crisis in the West and this and that between the MPC government in the central and the AG in the West and so on and so forth. But we saw some roles played by some traditional rulers. And permit me to mention Saje Sode Aderemi, who was the first governor in Black Africa of a region at that point in time. Now, I am not apportioning blame, so I'm saying somebody was right or wrong, but I was looking at the role, I think His Imperial Majesty, the Honor of Ife then, Ade Soja Aderemi, played in that particular time. One thing that actually stuck to me was the fact that the king at that point in time, Honor of Ife, was rigorously defending the constitutionality of the action and the constitutional process of the question of who had the right, to consider the parliament or to ask the premier or not to swear in the premier, which he had authority to do. Let's forget about the politics of it. At the end of the day, it was removed from power and so on and so forth. But what I'm talking about is that it played a critical role in guiding the constitution. But then that also became the problem. Where do you draw the line between the role of a traditional ruler as an unbiased umpire in a democratic or in a political dispensation? In other words, a very slippery slope. And it wasn't too long ago in this country, I think it was during the same Buhari Diagbon regime, that we saw probably the massive collision between traditional institution and the modern institution, in which some, I think the Dasuki, Oni, and some other were restricted to their particular domains at a point in time. But be that as it may, traditional rulers are the first port of call at the grassroots governance. And part of the problem we confront in the country today, just like policing itself, is that we have removed governance too far from the people it is meant for. Point blank. If there's a problem in my locality, one person that I see constantly, one person that talks to me constantly is my Bale, is my local chiefs, is people I relate with on a daily basis, people I sit with. I don't think about the governor in the state capital when I'm probably 1,000 miles away, hundreds of miles away from the person. So traditional rulers have a critical role, to play in the governance architecture of this country. The question is, how can they discharge that particular role? How can they perform that particular role without compromising the sanctity and the sanctimoniosity of their particular institution? That is very important. They are the custodians of our values and cultures. We should not, overlook that. Then number two is the question of how can they play this role in a system in which you have people who traditionally do not respect civilians. That is, whether you are a traditional ruler or not. I'm talking about the armed forces now. Traditionally, you see a soldier saying you are a bloody civilian anyway. How do traditional rulers operate in a society that is still governed largely by those people? Look, most people, part of the problem we have in security in Nigeria, somebody made to observe, the commander-in-chief was ex-military, the NSA was ex-military, almost everybody in that state was ex-military. So we are in a democracy, but we're in a democracy that is dressed, I would rather say we're in a kind of a funny kind of government that is dressed in the toga of democracy, believing democracy is just casting a ballot. If traditional rulers must operate within that particular framework, then there is need for a bit of sitting down with them and letting them understand how best they can discharge that particular function without compromising the integrity of their office.
Let me bring in Professor Ohejirika at this point, and let's try and see if we've been able to sort that out. Can you hear us now, Professor Ohejirika? Well, we can see you, but we're just trying to see if you can hear us. Okay, well, that has not been sorted yet, but I guess they'll communicate with you, behind the scenes and see how we can sort that out. But, Professor Abbas, now, yes, I haven't made that point. I was going to say, the reasons, because look at the people who were present there. The Minister of Information was there, President of the Senate equally there, and then the IGP giving his narrative. Now, these are key people in that question as to the social media censorship. That is a big one as well. So they equally concluded that something needed to be done about social media. As a result of, they say, look, this whole thing they felt was predicated on a false narrative, and as such, they need to go ahead and censor social media. How does that sit with you?
All right, thanks, Chamberlain. Look, number one, I think the debate about social media has been deeply polarized. You know, social media actually is regulated. There is a moderation of social media by private entities, whether you are Google, whether you are Facebook, whether you are Twitter, whatever. There is private regulation of social media. I think what they are talking about is public control of social media. That is the true government. Look, let's be honest here. I do not think there is anybody in the world, any government in the world that is going to say one way or the other.
Hello?
Will not. Can you hear me?
But we'll come to you
Yes, I
soon.
can.
Just hold. Okay, just hang on a minute. Good. Just hold on. As soon as Professor Abbas concludes, we'll come to you. Go ahead, Professor Abbas.
I was saying that I don't think there's anybody who will say that there shouldn't be some level of control of social media. And as I say, it already exists. But you have to ask yourself a question. Why is Nigerian government now so gung-ho about controlling social media at this particular point in time? One, it has been, what happened about NSAS had been now linked with fake news. Now, if I take that, and as I said earlier on, the military came out to deny flatly what happened in Lekki. They were not there, they said. They were not there. It was all fake news. Now, who is being fake here? The military represent the Nigerian government. So they put out an information that was deeply fake. Should I then say, I as a civilian, I want to regulate the military in Nigeria? That is the first question, because the first issue of fake news that we had during that crisis came from the Nigerian institution called the military itself. So should we then be calling for civilian regulation of the military? That is the first question. Now, the second question is that, look, you have to balance the control of any media, whether print or whatsoever, with the fundamental human rights of the people. The Nigerian Constitution grants human rights. Agreed. Human rights have limits. Human rights will not, can be derogated in some specific circumstances. But we have to be careful to make sure that we do not sleepwalk into a totalitarianism in Nigeria. And that is my greatest fear. I heard somebody, one of the people in authority, maybe the Minister for Information or whoever, was talking the other day, a few days ago, saying that, or even in China, they couldn't use Google and this and that. Nigeria is not China, I'm sorry to say. The last time I checked, Nigeria is a democracy. Our democracy is failing. Our democracy is ailing. Our democracy is sick. But in a way, we are still a democracy. We are working to make it better. So we should not take steps that will make it worse. So now coming out and saying you want to clamp down on social media, let me ask you a simple question. Suppose there was no social media when Lekki happened. I'm using Lekki because it has become a metaphor of our collective lies, collective failure, collective irresponsibility, collective insensitivity, and collective detective agency that we saw at some point.
All right, Professor Abbas.
Suppose there was no social media at Lekki, what do you think will have happened?
Okay, let's bring in Professor Ihejirika at this point in time. Well, so much to unpack, but first, the comments of the IGP saying all of this was predicated on falsehood, and so they thought that something needs to be done about social media as the meeting agreed. So tell us your impressions about that particular decision concerning censoring social media.
Okay, thank you so much. I hope you can hear me now.
Loud and clear.
Okay, great. Sorry for the mix-up earlier on. I think it was due to the earpiece. Well, thank you so much for the invitation. And we have followed the goings-on with regard to the statements about regulating the social media, and especially after the meeting yesterday of the Northern Governors. We do know that the Minister of Information has been all over the place also for a long time talking about this regulation of the social media. The first thing we need to say is that we need to say that the social media is a different media platform from the traditional media. And it is easier to regulate the traditional media than the social media, because in the traditional media, the gatekeeping roles of the journalists are easier to regulate. than in the social media where the general public are both the producers and consumers of media content. So the difficulty there is that the gatekeeping is harder in the social media than in the traditional media. So, but the point is that the government is not yet clear about which aspect of the regulation of the social media they are really talking about. Is it about regulating people's access to the social media, or is it about regulating the kind of content that goes into the social media? If it is about regulating the content that goes in the social media, I think the best, the people that have to be in play are the operators or the owners of the platforms, like the major platforms, Google, Facebook, and so on. So it's to know how to ask them to moderate the content. And moderating the content is giving some guidelines about things that have to enter into the platforms and things that are, not allowed, especially things that, deal with violence and, hate speech and so on. But as far as we know, most of these major media platforms have already put in place what they call community rules and, of engagement. So there are already many rules they have that help them to moderate the content, that do kind of, post facto kind of regulation on content that are posted on their platforms. We know for sure that sometimes they send warnings to people who post images that are not allowed. Sometimes they even can lock out some people who repeatedly keep on posting images that are not allowed or that are against the community rules. So if these things are already in place, one wonders then, what again is the government talking about in terms of regulating the social media? So in that aspect, I think there's need for some kind of transparency from the government to come out clear and let us know what are they talking about in terms of regulating the social media. Is it regulating access, as is done in some non-democratic countries, like my colleague mentioned about China? These are non-democratic countries. They regulate access to the social media. They can bar their citizens from accessing some social medias like YouTube, like Facebook, and so on. But that's not a democratic setup. So if you're talking about a democratic setup, we need to come clear and know precisely what aspect of social media regulation that we are dealing with here in the country. And I think up to now, I don't think the government has been able to make a clear representation on this. And that is why there's a lot of suspicion among the citizenry that the government wants to lock out people from social media. They want to shut people out. They don't want free expressions and all that. So what I'm saying is that there is need for clear and precise ideas about what this regulation is all about.
All right, we'll go to break, but we'll return and continue our conversation on some of the recommendations and the highlights of the Northern Leaders meeting which occurred yesterday. Welcome back. Still talking about part of the resolutions of the Northern Leaders meeting, some of which included there's this plan. They say social media has got to be censored. They need to ensure that some of these things don't go out of place because they felt that there were subversive elements who took advantage of that protests and eventually it spiraled out of control. So they reject and condemn those subversive actions of the NSAS protest. And then they call for major control mechanism and censorship of the social media practice in Nigeria. They equally spoke about traditional rulers who they think should be given formal roles in the governance architecture of the country. So there are several other recommendations, but which you get to see as we progress. So, but we still do have two gentlemen with us, Professor Ademola Abbas, International Law and Global Affairs Analyst, as well as Professor Walter Ihenjerika, who is of Development Communication, University of Port Harcourt. So, Professor Ihenjerika, about you speaking about the content or what exactly do they want to regulate about social media? How should they proceed with some of these things? So from some of the narratives they've given, if the IGP says, look, there's been an issue here, there's a problem which they think should be addressed in order not to allow quote-unquote subversive elements even take advantage of the social media, and then who knows how things could spiral out of control. So do you oppose their quest to go about that regulation, or is it how they are communicating their intention to Nigerians, as a result of which it seems to be resisted, because the National Assembly will equally have a huge role to play, because the President of the Senate was equally there, and he thought, well, it might just be about time. So what key issues do you think they are missing and should be addressed differently?
All right, thank you very much. Like I pointed out earlier on, the government needs to come out clear and let the Nigerian citizens know. The Nigerian citizens should know what they are really talking about when it comes to regulating the media. I listened to the clip you played just, they had a minister was saying that, they had a stakeholders meeting, which involved also the major players, that's the major tech companies, and they were involved. And, procedures were laid down about how to manage, incendiary content, violent content, hate speech, and fake news. And I pointed out that some of these techs already have put in place modalities for carrying this out. So my worry is when the government continues to talk about regulating the social media, when all these are already in place, what it means is that they are looking for something else. Either it means clamping down on the social media, shutting people out. And if you listen to the tone of the resolution of the Northern Governors, it almost sounds like that. And which takes us back to, systems where the government regulate access to the media, and whatever they don't like, they don't want it to. Of what I believe is the issue at stake. So in that regard, my worry is the government has not told us clearly what they are regulating. Are they regulating the content that people post, which already has mechanism of being being checkmated? Are they regulating people's assets? So they should come out clearly and let us know what they want to regulate. But if it's about access, we will say no, because in a democratic dispensation, people have the freedom of speech. People have the freedom of expression. But the freedom of speech and freedom of expression does not allow people to engage in hate speech, does not allow them to propagate fake news. So those ones are not covered by the freedom of speech. So what happens is that the technological companies that provide a platform for social media should be empowered in such a way that they can take down contents that are violent, take down contents that promote hate speech, take down contents that are found to be fake.
Those mechanisms are already there. I mean, Facebook has it.
That's the point.
Twitter has it.
That's the point. That's the point I'm making. Instagram has it. All those mechanisms are already in place. We know that Instagram locks out people who consistently post news that are not in tandem with their community regulations. So those mechanisms are there. So that's why I'm asking, what is the government talking about now if they keep on talking about regulating the social media? So we need to know. So it's not yet clear to a good number of people in Nigeria. So that's the point I'm making. Let them be clear. Do they want to shut people out like it's happening in China or in South Korea or some of these undemocratic countries? If that is the intention, then it has to be resisted because it's not in conformity with the principles of democracy.
Well, clearly, any government official, any government official will tell you that that's not the plan, but then perhaps we'll wait to see. Let me ask you, Professor Abbas, about this. I'm perhaps also taking you back in time a little bit. In the aftermath of the annulment of the June 12 election, there was a kind of clampdown, a huge clampdown on the media at the time. The print media was shut down. Of course, if it's not the state media, there was no information or communication from anywhere. We saw how that ended up. Guerrilla journalism grew and all of that. If we are to situate that with now, and indeed, the government goes ahead and says, if, just a big if here, that it's an intention to censor what people are saying on the social media. How do you see that playing out? What are the implications that we may not be giving attention to now? Should that be the route?
Thanks so much, Ayo, for that question. You've said it all. June 12 annulment, the government thought, and I'm happy you mentioned the word, a big if. The government thought at that point in time it could control people's determination to express themselves, which it tried to using brutal force and so on and so forth. But then guerrilla journalism developed. Tempo and so many other print media did fantastic jobs. Some of them I remember were operating from certain embassies and some other covert places in the country and even outside the country at that point in time. So the government found to its own consternation that it couldn't at the end of the day suppress the people. Look, it's for government to always try, especially when a government is not doing what it should be doing. They will invest in all the negative things that it shouldn't be investing in. That is number one. Number two, and I'm happy you use the word big if. It's a big if. The discussion we're having today presupposes that the government will in fact be able to censor or control or clamp down on social media in Nigeria. And by so doing, if it does that, by so doing, completely shut out Nigerians and Nigerian youth. It is a terrible mistake for two reasons. Number one, Nigerian youths have shown loud and clear they are very savvy. I think one of them sold their app, whatever it is, for $200 million just about a couple of weeks ago. And I was very happy about that. They are technologically savvy. They are smarter than most of our generations and most of the people in government. So even if you were to say you are able to control, you're able to clamp down, which I think they're trying to do, because to be honest with you, the whole idea of control and whatever they are saying is, for me, is a euphemism for saying we are going to clamp down. If they were able to achieve that, that is not going to be it's not going to deter or derail in the long term the ability of Nigerians to freely express themselves. I granted an interview about a month before, permit me to say before the EndSARS program started, and the anchor asked me a question about the role of the Nigerian Labour Congress, and I told the person, look, if your pains are biting enough, you don't wait for any union to represent you. You will go out and you will make it known. You will protest. You will express your feelings because it's paining you. You don't. And eventually, that is what happened in the country. So don't let's kid ourselves. The government can delude itself to think that by clamping down on social media, by clamping down on print media, so therefore you are going to control the people's will. No. But let me take a step back. What my colleague said, which is what I said earlier on, that there are already private regulation of the social media. So the question is, what aspect of it is the public going to regulate? And I think one thing we are also missing out of this is that the government is not telling us how they are going to balance this with the human rights that the Nigerian Constitution gives to all Nigerians. Nobody has done that. So straight away, there is no question in my mind that the government will go ahead, no matter what you say. Something I've already resigned to the fact that this government.
Well, just one moment, Professor Abbas. Just one moment. There's something you said about, what already exists as far as the private, regulators are concerned, Google, Facebook, and the rest of them. But then the question also came to my mind earlier about what existing laws do we have that already deal with these things that is not doing what it is supposed to be doing? Is that an admittance of failure or weakness on the part of those who are supposed to enforce the law, or the weakness of those laws, if there are any?
Absolutely fantastic question, Ayo. Let me take you one step. Section 2.3 or Section 230 of Section C, Paragraph 1 of the Communication and Decency Act, 1990s of the US, made it loud and clear that you cannot actually use law to go against or to go after social media platform providers. You have to make a separation between the providers of those platforms and the users of the platform. Now, in Nigeria, we haven't made that distinction yet. Look, I am talking to you as somebody also who has been a subject of social media attack here and there, and most of us suffered it one way or the other. But the truth is, if I feel aggrieved enough, all I have to do is to look back into the law. There is a lot of sedition, there is a lot of libel to be able to target, to be able to use that law to target those who, publish things that are uncomplimentary or that are defamatory or slanderous about Nigerians. You can use the laws are there, but there are some laws that we need to be working on, and that is, I think, where the government has dropped the ball, and that calls into the question the real motive of government now trying to rush through this clamping or this control that they're talking about. Because we have a constitution, we have a very active parliament. Go back to the parliament, bring laws to them. Laws can come from Nigerians. Look, Nigerians themselves as citizens, as individuals, they are wary of certain elements of social media platforms, social media activities. Nobody is doubting that. But what the government needs to do is to have a honest and frank conversation with all Nigerians to say, look, we have all suffered this, we are also going to suffer it. How can we genuinely bring all this under some kind of control? Not censorship. Censorship gives me the creeps, because when the government says they want to censor, is the first step towards total clamping down. you know, and I think that is important. That is very important to bear in mind. So let's look at the law that's existing. Let's look at gaps that there are today. Then let's look at how best to fill the gaps. We can borrow from other jurisdictions. There are many countries in the world that we can borrow from, for goodness sake, without sometimes reinventing the wheel. All we have to do is to be able to. I just gave you section 2.
Okay, let's bring in Professor Onyeka at this point. Now, assuming without considering that there is a need for some things to be done. Now, the other question is that, yes, government is muting that something needs to be done. And if they were to communicate to you clearly what they intend to do, whether or not is the content or how some of these things are published and who does what, there are those who also question, should governments be the one leading this narrative, or do you think that perhaps you should have other bodies who should come in and actually examine some of this conversation and find out whether or not it's worth taking a step further? Because yes, people will tell you, from the last social media bill they saw, they just felt, look, if this is the way they want to go about it, then there might be problems.
All right, so the point about all this is that we need to distinguish the three actors in play when we are talking about social media. On one hand are the media platform providers. On the other hand is the government as the regulator of all, and then the policy maker in every country. Then on the other hand is the general users, you know, the users who are both users and content producers as far as social media. Now, what I believe both myself and my colleague are trying to make clear is that we're trying to ask the government, are you regulating access? Are you regulating content? If you're regulating content in the social media, we have to recognize the difficulty in regulating content, because the only way you can regulate content in the social media is through censorship. And once you censor people, they don't have access again. And we say the reason why social media is because it gives people possibility of expressing themselves, and therefore it is their right to do so. So who are those to be involved in formulating a clear-cut way of avoiding, because the issue here is avoiding the negative fallouts of the social media use. We are not talking about the general use of the social media, we are talking about the negative fallouts. And the negative fallouts are hate speech, violence, cyberbullying, and fake news. These are the major negative fallouts of social media use. And so the question is, how do we curb these negative fallouts? We have given the first point that the social media platform providers are already doing something. We already all agree that they have already put in place certain criteria, certain ways of curbing all these negative fallouts of social media use. The second people that should be involved are the users of the social media. And the users of the social media have to be brought to bear on the consequences that can emanate from their irresponsible use of the social media. And in that regard, on the point of view of the users, we advocate training, teaching, media education at all levels. There's a subject we now have, in various institutions, which is media education, especially new media education. Training people about their rights and responsibilities in making use of the social media. On the government part, the government are policymakers. They can make regulations about how these platform providers can operate within the country, especially with regard to mitigating this, but they cannot stop these platform providers from operating. Like my colleague pointed out, the world has gone a long way. Our young people in Africa today are at par with their colleagues all over the world as far as social media use and social technologies are concerned. So even if the government cuts down on Facebook or any other social media platform, they have the capacity to develop their own social media networks. And in that regard, we will continue to start having multiplicity of social media, and the problem, becomes bigger. So in this regard, what we are asking the government is to make policies that can help strengthen the media platform providers.
All right, gentlemen,
Yes.
Let's wind down with this now. They equally talked about policing, the structure of policing. Perhaps it's time to do something about it. What do you think? How should we approach this? Professor Onyeka, let's start with you.
Is it policing the social media?
No, policing security in the country.
Okay, security in the country. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we have always advocated that, police, the security outfits should be close to the people as possible. They are the servants of the people. They should be there to protect the people. The Nigerian citizens deserve, adequate protections from the citizens, So there should be every effort made to reform, reorganize our security outfit to enable them to serve the purpose for which they are set up. And that purpose is protecting the lives and properties of Nigerian citizens, making that security outfit close enough to the people. So in that regard, that also gives room to the discussions about community and local policing outfits. Once the police are close enough to the locality, know their environment, know the people they are serving, and they know that the people they are serving are their brothers and sisters, and whatever happens to them affects them also indirectly, I think it will go a long way to enhancing policing. Part of the problem, like my colleague pointed out earlier, is that our structure of governance a lot of time is far removed from the people. There's a kind of, distance between the governed and the government. So we need to bring policing as close enough to the people as possible and imbibing the local security officers that they are there for the good of the people, not to extort them, not to harass them, not to intimidate them, and certainly not to make them feel that it is better not to have the police in place. So we are talking, there's need for total reform of the policing system to bring them as close enough to the people as possible.
All right, Professor Abbas, talking about policing, much as, yes, you had people who disagreed that, SARS, because, there were those who thought, well, if some people wanted SARS, should the government have said, okay, fine, for those areas that SARS were just not working right, we'll abolish it. And then in those areas where they think, no, reform the police, well, SARS hasn't been bad to them, because that conversation also made it was out there at the time, whether or not they should have kept SARS in some areas and scrapped them. But the decision has been taken already. They're over and done with. Now you have SWAT. And so it then raises questions as to how and what how they'll carry out their duties, especially if you then hear the comments of policing of the IGP. Chances are that there may be those who may misunderstand or misconstrue that comment as to they might not have been happy with the scrapping of SARS. And so can we then say that, well, if SWAT was going to go ahead and operate, do we expect fundamental changes, or how should we approach this question of policing in the first place?
Well, thank you very much, Chamberlain. And I'm not going to reinvent the wheel. I think my colleague has covered quite a lot of good grounds on that, on general policing as a whole. But look, there was need, and there is still need to reform policing in Nigeria as a complete structure from the scratch. Welfare system is poor, training is poor, and so on and so forth. Let me give you an example. I served on the board of Lagos State Security Trust Fund for 4 years in Lagos State here. And I know how much the Lagos State government till today pumps into the RRS, that is Rapid Reaction Squad in Lagos State, and I compare that to, and don't forget, policing is under the federal authority, and I know how much each policing is budgeted for by the country. Sometimes it's not even enough to buy their berets. You have a police that buys his uniform. You have police people that buy their uniform, they buy their beret, they buy their shoes. How can you expect such people to be able to discharge their function responsibly? That is question number one. Number two, look at barracks, for goodness sake. Many police barracks in Nigeria are not even fit for the worst criminals anywhere in the world. Many police barracks in this country are not even up to the standard of zoos. I've been to some fantastic zoos where you keep animals. And we then expect such policing people to come out and do fine job. No, I think we're making a mistake in that. Earlier on also I talked about the need to democratize, the need to put policing and other forces under democratic control, at the end of the day. But straight to the main question you ask in terms of, whether we are going to go anywhere with SWAT. Look, the North came out loud and clear, said they wanted NSAR. They wanted SARS to continue. And I agree with that entirely. I understand, because SARS had been very, very effective as far as some part of the North was concerned in at least securing them. So maybe SARS are just turn out to be a very bad apple in the South. So if that request had come before the, disbanding of SARS as a whole, maybe the federal government would have been able to sustain it for the North. But as you rightly said, that is gone now. What we have now is SWAT. The question is, what do we make of SWAT? Well, SWAT is still going to be operating within the same defective, dysfunctional policing system we have in the country. There is no way you can put a very new apple, a very fine apple, in the middle of rotten apples. Bees, flies, everything that come and eat the rotten apple will incidentally, invariably affect, or infest or infect the new apple you've put there. So you have to restructure, policing as a whole. So on the one hand, why you are saying, okay, you've given us SWAT, we want to see that SWAT is not a ninja reaction. We want to see that SWAT is not going to be just, call Rose a different name. That SWAT is
as you conclude on this, let me add this point. So why did it work in some areas, that's SARS, and then work in other areas like in some parts in the South? So have we seen enough safeguards to ensure that SWAT doesn't go the same way as SARS in the areas that SARS didn't work?
Straight away, SARS probably worked in the North because the security challenges there were different from what we were experiencing in the South. Whether in the Northeast or in the West and the Northwest, the security challenges there were radically different from what we confronted in the South. So in the South, there was less. So SARS had a free flow. They had a free reign. So the question is whether there is inbuilt mechanism, whether there is enough checks and balances, enough guidelines. That is one question the policing authority must answer, and fast enough. But where they're answering that, as I was saying earlier on, they must make sure that they transform the entirety of police. The structure is completely, altered. It's altered for the better of policing authority. It is only when you do that whatever improvement, whatever guidelines you put on ground for SWAT to operate with is going to be effective. Otherwise, it's going to be the same thing. So I'm going to conclude by saying, look, don't let's waste time. SARS is gone, they've given us SWAT. The most important thing is the government now must go back to the drawing board and see why SARS failed Nigerians as a whole, and that SARS failed completely, and how they can then transform those failures into lessons learned, and now they can use that to channel a better path for SWAT and for the overall policing system in Nigeria.
Well, Dr. Professor Ejirika, just one very, very quick question. In development communication, what are we missing as a nation? Very quick one.
Okay, in development communication, one of the things I normally tell my students in class that when a country is underdeveloped, it means that the general citizenry have not been formed about their rights and their responsibilities. What makes a country to develop is when citizens know their rights and their responsibilities and their contributions they have to make. So the problem we have here is that, first of all, our education system is still limping. As a lecturer, I have to make that point because I'm part of the system. I have seen how things are. And that's why also we are making all the calls for revamping our educational system, investing in the educational sector. It's a very big shame that our country is not yet prioritizing education. And this shows from the budget allocations that are made to the educational sector. Education is the key to development. If we don't educate our children, if we don't educate people about their rights and responsibilities, we will continue to repeat the same problems over and over again. So I will say straight off that one of the things that we are missing in this country is strong educational foundation, where people are formed to know their rights and to know their responsibilities. And that responsibility is about building up the country, making their contributions to the country, and using the resources available to develop the country. It's not about the certificate. It's about social.
All right, so that suggests that, the quality of items or the usage of the social media may be a function of the literacy level in the country, perhaps. Well, I guess we'll have to end it at that point. Walter Ejirika is a professor of development communications, University of Port Harcourt. We've also had Professor Ademola Abbas, who is an international law and global affairs analyst. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us today on the program. All right, so we'll be back in just a moment. We've got two gentlemen equally joining us when we return. Stay with us. Well, continuing our conversation on the recommendations of the Northern Leaders meeting, which held yesterday, some of which included regulating or censoring social media. They use them interchangeably to ensure that some elements don't hijack it. Well, they equally also had concerns about subversive elements who took advantage of the NSAS protest, and then they also spoke about the traditional media, giving them some other roles to play other than what we've seen. So and now we've got Hamzat Lawal, campaigner and chief executive of Connected Development at CODE. Good morning, and thank you for joining us today on the program. Well, it's not the first time that we're hearing about calls to regulate or censor social media. They highlight different challenges about fake news, bullying, cyberbullying, and the likes. Well, you heard all this narrative before, but this time around, Northern Leaders equally backing the fact that something needs to be done. What do you think now about this?
Good morning, Chamberlain, and thank you for having me. It's quite sad and unfortunate that we're using quality airtime to talk about the regulation of social media when we're supposed to invest this time and energy and our effort to talk about the numbers of out-of-school children, or the fact that a lot of Nigerians don't have access to quality healthcare or lifestyle. But that being said, I think we need to be clear that the Northern rulers, I would say the Northern rulers, have met and have come up with a resolution that we should regulate social media. Again, when old people come together and they don't understand something, instead of them to try to understand or go and learn about it, and because they are scared, then they think that the best solution is to gag the voice of citizens in a democracy. Chamberlain, this is a democracy where people are meant to express themselves. They've talked about worries about fake news. I believe we have existing laws and regulations that helps to tackle fake news. And again, it shows that, our rulers are not looking at the future. Because you're in power today, and because you don't want citizens to criticize the fact that you're not delivering on your promises on democracy, and then you want to gag their voice and stamp upon their right to access to freedom of expression. So again, for me, it is really sad that, we're talking about social media regulation. This is not the first, second, or third time. They would keep coming with this frivolous conversation of
the question then is, what is it that we're missing, or what is it that they are missing? We're talking about these things consistently. So is it that they've got a point to make that other citizens or younger generation don't see, or is it that they have refused to just see it from the perspective of the younger generation? So how do we connect that or reconcile it?
Well, the thing is, our rulers have seen young people as threats. They've not seen young people as part of the solution, and they've not been intergenerational dialogue and intergenerational conversation. Again, the older people, our leaders are meant to focus on the platform and the people who provides this platform. Why are we not talking about conversation about how government would ensure that Twitter, Facebook, and other social media platforms are able to put in place stronger policies? And then when people on their platform amplify fake news, then you ensure that the platform itself, you find the platform and even generate revenue from it. Because the platform is the one who is providing, this social media companies are the ones providing the platform for citizens to engage. So if you find any citizen wanting, you prosecute them and take them to court. And then you also find, the social media platform for ensuring that, for giving a voice to someone who is amplifying fake news. So we should focus more on, the providers of the social media platform, not the citizens, not the users.
Well, Mr. Lawal, just a moment of consideration of something. One of the things that's been on the front burner every time they talk about doing something with the social media, as Chamberlain said, censorship or regulating?
No, I'm not the one. That's the word the governors, someone that used in the meeting.
Okay, well, you're right, because the minister on, was it yesterday, was talking about censorship. The governor was talking about, the minister was talking about regulating, the governor was talking about censorship. Now, but the concern for them has always been that of fake news and hate speech. From your perspective, how relevant, how significant is that concern in all of this talk about regulating or censoring social media in Nigeria?
Fake news and hate speech is a big problem for us. Yes, we must not shy away of the fact that some people have used the social media platform negatively. And we must understand that this is a platform where people would use positively or negatively. Yes, it beckons on government to ensure that, this platform are used to promote unity and peaceful coexistence. But then again, you cannot rule a country based on propaganda, because why are we having as much agitation, as much miscommunication, misinformation that we have? It's because government itself is not proactive to provide timely information. And in any case, when they provide information, most of this information are not accurate enough. They're not well informed, and they're not backed with evidence or data. So I believe that there's an opportunity here. I say there's an opportunity here where we can have more dialogue and more conversation, but most importantly, have conversations that inform data and that have evidence. Fake news, hate speech, and when you have polity that is tensed, and then when you have a polity that is now geared towards 2023, I tell you for free, this social media gag, this censorship or regulation, it's all geared towards 2023, and we need to look beyond 2023. We cannot, because
Hamza,
of elections.
What makes you say that is geared towards 2023?
It is obvious. It is obvious because, see, what we've had, what we've experienced in the past 6 years, it's more about government propaganda. And then when you don't have evidence to show what you have done and the promises you have made and how you've kept this promise, then you need to find a way to gag the voice. First, Chamberlain, they came from mainstream media. And I know that they've already hit you guys, with 3 million naira. And now they're coming for social media. Social media is a platform where everyone can express themselves freely. And again, this is a democracy. 2023, so Nigeria would live and survive, above 2023. So again, we need leaders that look beyond 2023. It's everything, all the conversation. Because today, Northern Nigeria is not secured. Chamberlain, you cannot travel 200 kilometers without the scare of being kidnapped. But here we are, Northern leaders sitting and meeting at the Kashim Ibrahim House. We were hoping they were going to talk about, secure Northern Nigeria, because the young people leading this campaign on Twitter. But rather, they're talking about stiffening the voice of these young people, talking about ensuring, adequate security for lives and property in Northern Nigeria and the country at large. So this entire conversation, Chamberlain, I tell you for free, you don't have to pay me. It's about 2023.
So, speaking about young people, now it did appear that as though young people in the South, their experience with SARS and security is different from their counterparts in the North, because some thought that, they didn't seem to understand the experiences that some Southerners have with SARS, because they thought it's not the same thing. So speak to us about that. So why is it that, you had some people up north who just felt, no, we don't have that kind of experience, so it was difficult to kind of understand. Some saw it from a different perspective, as though it was politically motivated.
Chamberlain, people from the north who came publicly on social media and said they were not experiencing the same level of police brutality were sponsored. These people were sponsored. Chamberlain, I've traveled on the road across Nigeria. I've experienced firsthand police brutality in the north, in the south, in the west, and then the east. And maybe I should focus this conversation on the east and the south. For every 10 meters, there's a police checkpoint in the southwest, in the east and south. Sadly, these checkpoints are not checking if you're carrying contraband, but they're extorting citizens. citizens, and when I say citizens, these are people who live below, $1 a day, people who are struggling. When you look at genuine people who have come out to even share experience about police brutality, a lot of people from northern Nigeria have also shared their experiences. Some of our family members are traders, and we know what they experience traveling around the north when they move goods and services around, and then police harass them and ask them, for bribe, or ask them for handout. So again, you have people, paying influencers, and you have people who are mischief makers and who are carrying misinformation and saying that the experiences in the South is different from the North. It is one and the same. By the way, where in Nigeria is safe? Let's tell ourselves the truth. Can you get on your car and travel from Lagos down to Ebonyi and then travel to Zamfara, and you won't be scared that you might either get kidnapped or get attacked by armed robbers on the road? Speaking of which, is the road even motorable?
Well, our Rafsanjani also joins us in this conversation now. Let's see how much of him we can take. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Rafsanjani. So this whole conversation about what the northern governors have said, particularly the one that, talks about the regulation or control mechanism and censorship of the social media space in Nigeria. How do you see that playing out in the first place?
I think, thank you very much, Blaine. I think this is a very wishful thinking. If anybody thinks that Nigerians should not expose corruption, injustice, and all sorts of things that is making governance not work, I think that person is better go and have a rethink about it, because the world has moved on, and those who think that by this creative or by hiding information, they would be able to suppress and repress views of Nigerians. I think that era is gone. No amount of control or regulation that will make Nigerians not know or not expose wrongdoing. So if the intention is to undermine access to information and freedom of information, and also expose corruption and wrongdoing, like many of the people in authority to always want to have, I think they are just wasting their time. So they better focus on governance and do things that they can be remembered for good. But to come and say that you will want to control and regulate, you in the first place, have you regulated yourself? You are engaging in all sorts of wasteful, all sorts of videos, projects, all sorts of impunity, and you don't want Nigerians to expose that. I think that is just very deceptive. So,
do you, in your opinion, Mr. Rafsanjani, well, add to that opinion this one, or your perspectives on this one, which is the fact that the reasons being adduced for trying to regulate or put up mechanisms for regulating the social media space in Nigeria is about fake news and hate speech and on like that. For you, we've had conversations on that all day, all morning, but for you, is that significant? How significant is it?
The truth is that, no responsible and reasonable media outlet that will want to promote, fake news or news that or information that is not authentic.
Oh dear. Well, let's get back to Mr. Lawal while we try to get Mr. Rafsanjani back. Now, you've worked, Mr. Hamzat Lawal, you've worked in the environments where many people's voices are not heard, the underserved in various communities across a number of African countries, no less a place as Nigeria as well. You referenced something the other time about the fact that there are a good number of states in the north who are having issues, who are underserved, who are living below the poverty line, they are marginalized and all of those things. why don't we have such issues as prominent in the social media space as many other issues being raised in the South?
Well, the
We,
truth of
we've
the matter is
actually
that
had
No, Mr.
we've
Sanjani,
actually
just
had
one moment. That's for
conversation.
Mr. Lawal. Please go ahead, Mr. Lawal.
We've
Yeah.
actually had and
Yeah.
led conversation about issues about insecurity, about out-of-school children, Al-Majarinchi. We've had this conversation. But then again, you would not say citizens should be the one to champion the delivery of this conversation. We've elected government into office. We all cannot, run for office. We all cannot get appointed into public office. But we have entrusted our mandate collectively to President Muhammadu Buhari, to 36 state governors, to state assembly members and federal lawmakers for a reason, for them to bring about solution, for them to bring about ideas. And we're playing our roles as civil society leaders, as activists and campaigners. We're leaving our comfort zone and going to various grassroots communities to collect voices, to document voices and amplify these voices, trying to influence policy and decision making. So, we have a government, and it's the responsibility of government to work with citizens, unite citizens, and bring about the solutions that are sustained. Now we're talking about Agenda 2063. We're talking about Agenda 2030. We're talking about where would Nigeria be in the next decade of action. So now is the time to take action. So we've had this conversation. Maybe we've not had them enough. I agree. Maybe we've not had them enough. But we've had this conversation. And again, you need to also understand that there's high level of burn rates. What do I mean? When you have this conversation and there's high expectation on government, and then government does not act over time, what happens is a lot of citizens will go back to their shelf. Right now, a lot of citizens are their own electricity provider. A lot of citizens are their own, water board in their various homes. A lot of citizens are providing personal security for themselves. So this is a failure of governance. We must call it what it is. And see, I will tell you again, the problem, the problem is a political problem. And the solution must be a political solution. And that's why I tell you, all this conversation about regulating free speech, it's about 2023. Because again, politics define and decide everything in Nigeria, sadly so. Because after our campaign and electioneering period, we're supposed to now talk about governance and unite both the ruling and opposition together, because Nigeria have brought all of us under this umbrella. But we continue politicking. We don't know where to draw the line between governance and politics and then public policy. So again, it's government. Government must unite, must lead this conversation and ensure that they inspire, because the role of leadership is to inspire. And right now, you and I are not being inspired by the actions of government.
What do you say to those who are of the view that perhaps, the northern leaders haven't seen that much resistance as to their quest to censor social media, and that's why they think that they have that huge consensus or support to go ahead and regulate social media?
The northern leaders and our rulers are living in a world of their own. And they think there is no, they feel that there is no much, agitation, or there's no much rejection of this proposed regulation or censorship. It would shock them, like we say. It would take them by surprise. See, you are trying to gag the voice of people who have collectively given you their mandate and entrusted you into public office. And then you're saying that the biggest concern for you is to stiffen their voice. It would really shock them when it hits them that, young people, particularly young people from their region, would not accept this. Mischief makers would definitely cash in on this. And, you have people around them who are sycophants who tell them that they are the best thing that have happened to Nigeria after jollof rice. It would really shock them.
What do you think will happen if they go ahead?
What do I think would happen?
If they proceed, yes.
If they proceed, what do I think would happen? Citizens would rise. Yes, a couple of weeks ago, we saw how young people united and organized themselves peacefully under the NSAS protest. That is the tip of the iceberg. if they go ahead and try to gag social media and stifle the voice of citizen, then citizen would rise. Because again, before you form a government, it is the citizen that actually form the government. Legitimacy, it's in the hands of the citizen. And if they continue, citizen would take back that legitimacy. And then hopefully we would not have rulers who would put Nigeria in chaos. I believe that young people are relatively and generally peaceful, and they will continue to undertake their role as active citizens peacefully, but then they should not be pushed to the wall, because right now it's about survival, and even with the impact of COVID-19. So you can't come with a policy that gags the voice. Rather, come with a policy that guarantees quality lifestyle, access to healthcare, access to employment and jobs, sustainable jobs and decent jobs, and economic growth. Let's grow the GDP. Let's make Nigeria proud, rather than discussing social media. Other countries are talking about focusing on, the big data company, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, but you are focusing on your citizen to shut them up. Who does that?
Mr. Rafsanjani, so this is how far we have come, and the implications are quite right there in our faces. If we are to get past this, on the part of the citizens, what should we do? On the part of government, what needs to be done? Mr. Rafsanjani, can you hear me? Okay, well, maybe your mic is on mute or something, but if you can unmute it, fine. Yes, go ahead, please.
I can hear you now. I can hear you now. Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yes, I said on the part of government, this is how far we have come as a people. On the part of the people, there is a job to do. On the part of the government, there is a job to do. We've been talking about what government should or should not do. But what's there for the citizens to do, really? And how should the government respond?
Okay, I think every decent and responsible patriotic Nigerian should behave responsibly. And when you have any information, before you circulate it, you need to verify, because there's implication, for that. There are some people who will deliberately want to cause mayhem and want to, trigger violence and conflict. So if you are a peace-loving person, you do not need to share or spread news that is not authentic, that is not verifiable. If you do that, you know that you are actually not doing what you're supposed to do as part of your civic responsibility as a responsible and patriotic citizen. That's one. Number two, there should be also repercussion, or consequences. If you do anything, against anybody, that person, can take you to court. So therefore, there's a repercussion, there's a legal consequences of anybody who deliberately, create mischiefs with the view to undermine or to create, disharmony or brought about crisis. So definitely, every reasonable and responsible person.
These are things, I think that these are part of the things that, government is perhaps talking about when they say that they want to regulate the social media, that there should be consequences for such actions as you have painted out. So are you validating, aren't you in this way validating what the government intends to do?
No, I am validating the fact that you don't need to be in a government for somebody to actually, undermine or to create any things that will, bring about, discomfort or just undermine your integrity. So it is individually, you can go to court if somebody comes to malign your character and you believe that he or she has no any valid reason to do that. You can go and seek redress. It doesn't need government here. What the governors are trying to do is simply to cage people, is to censor people, and that cannot work, because even if you say you want to regulate social media in the north, how will you be able to regulate the social media in the other part of the country and also in the world globally? Now we are in the modern technology. You don't need to be in Nigeria to operate social media. So I think some of the people that are even thinking this way, they are so backwarded that they don't even understand how the world works now. It's because people just think that they can sit down and come up with policy. And let me also tell you, it is the same politicians who are actually spreading fake news. Just what during the campaign. Look at how they deform the character of one another. Look at how they also present fake videos, non-existent projects as part of achievement. And this is the reason why many of them, they think that they just need to censor, they need to, block people from expressing their opinion, which is contrary to the law. Look, the Constitution of Nigeria is very clear. Nigerians are entitled to express their views and opinion. And if that views, somebody thinks that, should not be expressed, I think it is just a sheer lack of understanding of the constitutional and human rights of such kind of person. So I want to advise those who are thinking that they can actually even impose anything. They cannot impose it because they are the greater breaker of, those kind of policy. When
All right,
they
then.
want to do campaign, they malign one another.
All right, we get your point, Awal. We need to anchor at that point. Awal Rafsanjani, Executive Director of CISLAC, as well as Hamza Lawal, who is the Chief Campaigner, and Chief Executive of Connected Development Co. Gentlemen, thank you for talking to us this morning. All right, let's take a look at some feedback coming through from you. Well, ONU sends this particular message about what we just discussed in the last 2 hours. He says, let Nigerian Governors Forum know that fake news / social media doesn't lead to looting of public fund, ethno-religious discrimination in appointments / employment, imbalance, political participation and resource contribution and sharing, undemocratic democracy, and government / bandits' disregard for lives.
Oshino Kingsley says this shouldn't be about the North or the South. It should be for the common good of the poor Nigerians who find it extremely hard to earn a living. This government came to power on the quest of social media and fake news. Please address the core issues.
Okay, Short Trade says, I really pray the Nigerian government censor social media so that we, Nigeria techpreneurs in Nigeria, can develop new social media brands for Nigerians. The government can't stop social media. They will only succeed in changing the owners.
Oh, wow. Manasseh says we have the largest number of missing persons, IDPs, out-of-school children, desertification, low productivity, GBV, as gender-based violence, and maternal and child mortalities in the world in northern Nigeria, and that should be the major concern of the governors and traditional rulers.
Okay, there you go then. Well, that is it today. We thank you all for watching and for your comments as well. We'll see you again tomorrow. I'm Chamberlain, so.
Do have a wonderful day and keep safe. I'm Ayo Makinde.